In 1984, a woman named Dona Carmen sold snacks from a wooden cart outside the Mercado de la Merced in Mexico City. She had been there for 31 years. Her cart held pepitorias, cocadas, charamuscas, and tamarind balls she rolled by hand at 4 in the morning. By 1991, she was gone. The market renovated. The cart did not come back. That snack she rolled by hand is number 7 on this list. Number 1 required a craft that is over 200 years old. Number 10 was pulled from store shelves after people started getting sick. These 25 snacks were once everywhere, in mercados, at school gates, on your abuela's kitchen table wrapped in wax paper or stacked on a clay plate. They fed a generation of Mexican kids who did not need a brand name to know something was good. Subscribe and hit the bell. Here are 25 Mexican snacks from the 1980s no one makes anymore. Number 25. Habas tostadas con chile. Your tío would buy a paper bag of these outside the church on Sunday, and they would be gone before the sermon ended. They started as dried fava beans, hard, flat, pale little discs that looked like nothing worth eating. A squeeze of lime, a dusting of chile powder, sometimes a pinch of salt. In the 1980s, vendors outside churches and schools in Puebla and Oaxaca sold them in twisted paper cones for 500 old pesos, which was practically free. You could hear them crunching from 3 pews away. Kids would smuggle them into class in their pockets and eat them one at a time under the desk. The fingers smelled like lime and chile for the rest of the day. Nobody sells them like that anymore. The commercial bags in plastic do not carry the same taste. The ones from the cart had soul. Number 24. Pepitorias. The sound of making pepitorias was the sound of a mercado at 5 in the morning. Pumpkin seeds, pilonchilo, a clay pot. That was the whole recipe. A woman would toast the pepitas on a comal until they popped and darkened, melt the pilonchilo with a little water until it became a thick amber syrup. Then fold the seeds into the sugar and press the mixture flat into small discs on wax paper. They cooled in minutes. They sold for centavos. In Oaxaca and Guerrero, you could buy a stack of 6 wrapped in newspaper for less than a peso in 1983. The pepitas had to be fresh. That mattered. Stale seeds turned the whole thing bitter. The women who made them knew their pepitas the way a baker knows flour. They could tell by smell whether the batch was right. You do not find handmade pepitorias in mercados anymore. The women who pressed them are gone. Their daughters did not learn to stand over clay pots at dawn. Number 23. Totopos de manteca. Every abuela in Mexico saved yesterday's tortillas. That was not thrift. That was tradition carried for years. The tortillas from the day before went stale, just enough to hold their shape in hot oil. She cut them into triangles, sometimes with scissors, sometimes tearing them by hand. Then she fried them in manteca, pork lard in a deep cazuela on the stove until they puffed and turned golden brown. A shake of salt while they were still glistening, maybe a squeeze of lime and a spoonful of salsa verde from the molcajete on the counter. The totopos were ready before the kids woke up. You ate them standing at the counter. Nobody called them artisanal. Nobody photographed them. They were free because they were made from what was already there. Now your tortillas go in the trash. Number 22. Las abejitas. These were not really candy. They were more like a dare. Little plastic bags shaped like bees, filled with dyed liquid that was mostly water, sugar, and food coloring. Red, green, yellow, orange. Every color tasted the same, sweet and vaguely chemical. But the point was never the taste. The point was opening one without destroying the school uniform. Nobody succeeded. There was always a stain. In Mexico City in 1986, a bag of 10 abellitas cost about 200 old pesos, practically free. Street vendors sold them outside primarias in every barrio in the capital. Teachers hated them because kids would squirt each other and leave sticky spots on the desks. Parents hated them because the dye did not wash out. Kids loved them because they were cheap, they were messy, and adults disapproved. That was the entire appeal. They disappeared sometime in the early 1990s and nobody fought to bring them back. Number 21. Gorditas de nata. A tia would make these on Sunday mornings, and the whole house smelled like warm cream and cinnamon. Nata was the thick cream that formed on top of boiled milk, flour, sugar, a pinch of baking powder, sometimes an egg. She would mix it all into a soft dough, pat it into thick little rounds about the size of your palm, and cook them on a dry comal until they turned golden with dark spots. They were crumbly. They were warm. They fell apart if you held them too tight. In Aguascalientes and Zacatecas in those days, panaderías sold gorditas de nata alongside polvorones and empanadas. They cost about 300 old pesos each, but the ones from the panaderia were never as good as the ones from the kitchen because the taya used nata she had skimmed that morning from real milk, not the processed cream from a carton. That simple difference was everything. Today, most people under 40 do not even know what nata is. Number 20. Cacahuates garapinados. Outside the estadio. Outside the school. Outside the mercado on Saturday mornings. Wherever there were people in the 1980s, there was a man with a copper cazuela full of cacahuates garapinados, raw peanuts, sugar, water, a wooden spoon. The whole process took about 20 minutes. The smell carried for half a block. In 1985, a paper cone of garapinados from a street vendor in Monterrey cost about 1,000 old pesos. You could hear the vendor's spoon scraping the copper before you could see him. The sugar would crack between your teeth and the peanut inside was warm and soft. Every cone was different because every vendor had a slightly different timing. That was the craft. Now they come in a plastic bag at the supermarket and they taste like sugar-coated cardboard. The copper cazuela is gone. The charcoal is gone. The vendor is gone. Number 19. Dulces de tamarindo caseros. Your abuela did not buy tamarind candy. She made it. Sometimes she added lime juice. Sometimes a pinch of salt. She rolled the mixture into small balls between her palms, then set them on a plate dusted with more chile powder to dry. In Veracruz and Tabasco in the early 1980s, women sold these handmade tamarind balls at bus stations and market entrances for about 100 old pesos each. The taste was sharp, sweet, sour, and hot all at once. Your lips burned, your tongue went numb. You reached for another one immediately. The commercial tamarind candies that replaced them, the ones in plastic wrappers with cartoon characters, are engineered in factories. They are consistent. They are calibrated. They are not the same. The difference between factory candy and your abuela's tamarind balls is the difference between a photograph and a memory. Now, this is not medical advice and I'm not telling you to change what you eat. This is just looking at how things used to be. Something happened to Mexican snacking in the late 1980s that nobody talks about. Oxxo opened its first franchise in 1978 in Monterrey. By 1990, there were over 500 stores across Mexico. By the year 2000, there were 2,000. Today, there are more than 21,000. Each one of those stores replaced a tiendita. And each tiendita that closed took a lifetime of handmade snacks with it. The abuela who rolled tamarind balls stopped rolling them because a factory in Jalisco could sell the same candy cheaper. The man with the copper cazuela stopped working his garapinados because kids wanted sabritas from a foil bag. This was replacement. And the thing that got replaced was not just candy. It was a relationship between the person who made the food and the person who ate it. Number 18. Chicharrones de harina caseros. The factory bags sold today are not what a mother made. She made the dough herself. Wheat flour, water, salt, a pinch of baking powder when they were completely dry and hard like little discs of plaster. She dropped them into hot oil and they puffed up in seconds, expanding 3 times their size into light, crunchy, airy chips. A squeeze of lime, a drizzle of Valentina, maybe some cueritos and aguacate on top. In the colonias of Mexico City in 1982, street vendors would fry them to order on portable burners and hand them to you in a plastic bag with salsa. About 500 old pesos, cheap and easy. The homemade ones had a chew that the factory versions do not have. That chew came from the kneading, from the time in the sun. Nobody has time for that anymore. Number 17. Pinole. Before protein bars, before energy drinks, before any of that existed, the Tarahumara runners of the Sierra Madre fueled 100-mile races through copper canyons on pinole. You could eat it dry, straight from your palm. You could stir it into water and drink it. You could sprinkle it over fruit. In Chihuahua, in the 1980s, vendors at the Mercado Central sold pinole in paper cones for about 800 old pesos. A single cone could keep you alive and working through the afternoon. The Tarahumara themselves have been making pinole for over 1,000 years. It is one of the oldest prepared foods in North America. But in the cities, in the barrios, in the kitchens of Mexican-American families in El Paso and Tucson, pinole has become a word most kids do not recognize. It is still made in small villages. It is almost never made in cities anymore. In 1983, Barcel released 4 new flavors of chips at the same time: pizzerolas, quesabritas, rancheritos, and katsupapas. Katsupapas were potato chips flavored with ketchup. The bag was red and white. The taste was sweet, tangy and salty in a way that should not have worked, but did. Kids in Mexico City would buy a bag after school, pour Valentina hot sauce inside, shake it and eat the chips one by one. But something went wrong. Reports started circulating that people were getting stomach problems after eating them. Whether the reports were true or exaggerated did not matter. The damage was done. Barcel quietly pulled katsupapas from the shelves. No announcement, no recall. They just stopped appearing in tienditas. 1 week they were there. The next week, gone. Some people still remember the taste. Most have forgotten the name. That is how a snack dies. Not with a scandal, with silence. Number 15. Chocolates sin nicotina. They looked exactly like a pack of cigarettes. A small cardboard box with a flip-top lid, and inside, 6 chocolate sticks wrapped in white paper. The chocolate was cheap and chalky. That did not matter. What mattered was the performance. A kid would pull one out, hold it between 2 fingers, bring it to the lips, and pretend to smoke it in front of friends during recess. Every kid in Mexico in the early 1980s did this. The brand name itself, sin nicotina, meant without nicotine, as if the fact that they were chocolate needed clarification. A box cost about 300 old pesos in 1984. Parents tolerated them until they did not. By the late 1980s, decades of concern about children imitating smoking behavior led to growing complaints. The candy did not get banned by the government. It got banned by mothers. One by one, schools in Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Mexico City started confiscating them at the gate. The company stopped making them. The mothers won. Number 14. Sugus. Open a Sugus wrapper and the smell hit you before the candy reached your tongue. Chewy, soft, square, wrapped in bright foil. Strawberry red, lemon yellow, orange orange. Each one was about the size of a peso coin, and it took just long enough to chew that you could finish one during a commercial break on television. Sugus were made by a Swiss company and sold across Latin America for decades. In Mexico, they were in every tiendita, every loncheria, every abuela's purse. Then the company stopped distributing them. Another brand called Gudus appeared and claimed to be the better successor. It was not. The texture was different, the flavor was flatter, the foil was shinier and cheaper. People noticed immediately. When you eat something every day of your childhood and then it disappears and someone hands you a copy. The tongue remembers what the mind forgot. Sugus are gone. Gudus are a reminder of what gone feels like. The snacks on this list aren't gone because they were bad. They are gone because they were slow. That is time. And time is the one ingredient that modern food production refuses to use. A factory can produce 10,000 tamarind candies in an hour. An abuela made 40 in an afternoon. The factory version costs less. The factory version lasts longer on a shelf. The factory version is the same every single time. And that sameness is the problem, because the snacks from the 1980s were never the same twice. The pepitorias from Monday were darker than the ones from Thursday. The garapiñados from the man near the school had more sugar than the ones from the man near the park. That inconsistency was not a flaw. It was proof that a person made it. And eating it was not just eating a snack. It was eating someone's morning. Number 13. Cori. Cori was the chewy candy that defined 3 decades of Mexican childhood. From the 1960s through the early 1990s, these small, soft, fruit-flavored rectangles were in every pocket, every school bag, every tiendita from Tijuana to Merida. The texture was somewhere between a caramel and a gummy. It stuck to teeth in a way that made dentists furious and children loyal. Then it vanished. The company stopped production. The reason was never clearly explained. Rumors circulated that the formula was too expensive, that the original supplier of the flavoring had gone out of business, that the factory closed. None of these were ever confirmed. What is confirmed is that multiple companies tried to bring Cori back. There were revivals and relaunches in different packaging. None of them tasted right. The original Cori had a specific chew, a specific sweetness, a specific way it dissolved on the tongue right before being swallowed. That was the recipe. And that recipe died with the factory that made it. Number 12. Motitas. Motitas were bubble gum made for one purpose: explosions. The gum itself was small, round, brightly dyed, and came in a little bag. The flavor lasted about 90 seconds. That did not matter. Nobody bought motitas for the flavor. The purchase was about the bubbles. The gum had a specific elasticity that let you blow bubbles larger than your head. And when they popped, the gum would splatter across the face in thin pink or purple sheets. It left whiskers like a cat or a leopard, which was exactly the point. A bag cost 200 old pesos. Cheap and easy to get anywhere. The gum left stains on cheeks that a mother had to scrub off with a wet towel. She was never happy about it. Motitas disappeared from tienditas sometime in the mid-1990s. No farewell, no final bag. They were just gone, like the bubbles they made. Number 11. Mueganos. If you have never held a muegano, you have never understood what patience tastes like. These are small balls of fried wheat dough stuck together with piloncillo honey into a block the size of a fist. They originated in San Martin, Texmelucan, Puebla, and spread across Puebla, Tlaxcala, and Veracruz. The dough was simple: wheat flour, eggs, a pinch of salt. The timing was everything. Too early and the block fell apart. Too late and the sugar turned to glass. In Puebla in 1985, a muegano from a market stall cost 1,500 old pesos. The best ones had a thin web of crystallized sugar between each ball that cracked when you pulled one off. Eating a muegano properly required 2 hands and total concentration. That was its charm. It demanded your attention. Modern snacks don't ask anything of you. Mueganos asked everything. The difference between a homemade cocada and a store-bought cocada is the difference between a handwritten letter and a text message. Both deliver the same words, only one means something. Homemade cocada started with a fresh coconut. You cracked it open with a machete or the back of a heavy knife. You drained the water. The ingredients were fresh grated coconut, piloncillo, and sometimes a splash of condensed milk. Then you spooned the mixture onto wax paper in small mounds and let it cool. In the mercados of Acapulco and Colima in the 1980s, a homemade cocada cost 500 old pesos. And the women who made them had burns on their wrists from the copper pot. And that was the cost of the recipe. Now, cocadas come in plastic packaging from a factory in Jalisco. They taste like coconut. The homemade ones tasted like effort. Number 9. Alegrias con miel de abeja. The name means joys. That is not an accident. Popped amaranth seeds pressed together with honey into flat rectangular bars. This snack is pre-Hispanic. The Aztecs made it for religious ceremonies centuries ago. They mixed the amaranth with blood and shaped it into figures of their gods. The Spanish banned the practice, but the food survived. By the 1980s, alegrias were sold in every mercado in central Mexico. The key was the honey. Mesquite honey tasted different from orange blossom honey, and each batch was better for it. In Tulyehualco, a town south of Mexico City known as the capital of amaranth, families have made alegrias for years. A bar cost about 800 old pesos in 1986. Today, most commercial alegrias use glucose syrup. The bars look the same, and they hold together the same, but they do not taste like joy. Gaznates are what happens when a cook has more skill than ingredients. It starts with a thin dough made from flour, eggs, and a splash of aguardiente or mezcal. You rolled it paper thin, cut it into rectangles, wrapped each rectangle around a wooden dowel or a cane reed, and fried it until it turned golden and crispy. Then you slid the tube off the dowel and piped it full of meringue, meaning whipped egg whites with sugar. Some versions used rompope or fruit paste. The tubes were about the length of your finger, hollow, fragile, and incredibly delicious. In Oaxaca and Puebla, gaznates were sold at fiestas, bodas, and quinceaneras. A dozen cost about 3,000 old pesos in 1985. Making them required steady hands and dry weather because humidity made the tubes soggy before you could fill them. That is why they disappeared. Not because people stopped wanting them, because the craft required conditions that modern kitchens can't guarantee. A gaznate is a snack that only works when everything goes right. There is a word in Spanish that does not translate well into English. Antojo means a craving, but not the kind you satisfy at a drive-thru. An antojo is specific. It is tied to a place, a person, a time of day. You do not have an antojo for food. You have an antojo for your abuela's cocadas at 4 in the afternoon when the house smelled like coconut and piloncillo. These are cravings that cannot be fulfilled because the conditions no longer exist. The snack still exists in some form, but the context is gone. The cart is gone. The señora is gone. The plaza has a parking lot now. And what you are craving is not the food, it is the moment. That is why these snacks matter. They are not recipes, they are coordinates on a map of your childhood that no longer matches the streets. Number 7. Paletas de cajeta. Real cajeta takes hours. Goat milk, sugar, cinnamon, and patience. Then you pour it into small lollipop molds with sticks and let it harden. Homemade paletas de cajeta had a depth of flavor that the commercial ones never achieved because commercial cajeta is made with cow milk and thickeners. The goat milk version has a slight tang, a smokiness from the copper, and a richness that sits on the back of your tongue. In Celaya, Guanajuato, the capital of cajeta, generations of families made these paletas for local fiestas and sold them from trays lined with wax paper. about 400 old pesos each in 1984. The lollipop would go soft in the heat and bend slightly on the stick. That was how you knew it was real. If it stayed rigid and glossy, it was factory made. Real cajeta bends. Factories do not. Number 6. Chupirules. Nobody remembers chupirules fondly for the candy. They remember it for the packaging. These were lollipops wrapped in a plastic so aggressively sealed that opening one required teeth, fingernails, and sometimes a sharp object. The wrapping did not tear cleanly. It shredded into tiny strips that stuck to the candy and your fingers. They came in different colors, but all tasted similarly, cloying in the best possible way. Back then, chupirules cost about 100 old pesos at tienditas and were one of the cheapest candies available, easy to find anywhere. The fight with the wrapper was part of the experience. It gave you a story to tell. You did not just eat a chupirule, you survived one. They vanished in the early 1990s, and the only people who remember them are the ones who still have tiny scars on their thumbs from the plastic. Number 5. Mazapanes caseros. You know the commercial mazapan, the round disc in the red and white wrapper that crumbles the second you look at it wrong. That is not what this is about. This is about the mazapan your abuela made in her kitchen. Ground peanuts, powdered sugar, and something else she never told anyone. Maybe a drop of vanilla, maybe a pinch of cinnamon, maybe nothing at all, and the difference was just her hands. She ground the peanuts herself, sometimes on a metate, sometimes in an old hand-cranked molino. The oil from fresh ground peanuts made the texture different from the factory version. It was smoother. It held together better. It melted on your tongue instead of disintegrating into dust. They were imperfect. Some were thicker than others. Some had more sugar. That inconsistency was the recipe. The factory version is always the same. Your abuela's version was always hers. Number 4. Tortitas de Santa Clara. These belong to Puebla, and Puebla does not share easily. The labor was extraordinary. Peeling pepitas by hand takes hours. Grinding them on a metate without turning the paste into oil requires a specific pressure and rhythm that takes years to learn. Nuns in the convents of Puebla originally created these tortitas centuries ago, alongside camotes and other dulces conventuales. By the 1980s, a handful of panaderias in the historic center of Puebla still made them. A box of 6 cost about 5,000 old pesos in 1987. The best ones had a layer of pepita paste so thick you could see the green color through the powdered sugar. Now most of the panaderias that made them have closed. The convents no longer produce them for sale. And the art of peeling pepitas by hand for a cookie that sells for almost nothing has become a skill without an economy. Nobody pays enough for the tortitas to justify the hands. Number 3. Dulces de leche quemada. Fresh milk, sugar and fire. That is the recipe. Burned milk, leche quemada. The name describes the process. The process describes the patience. In Nuevo León and Coahuila, leche quemada was the candy of every rancho and every kitchen with a wood-burning stove for years. A batch used an entire gallon of milk and a full kilogram of sugar to produce maybe 30 small squares. In 1985, a bag of leche quemada from a market in Monterrey cost about 2,000 old pesos. The candy stuck to your teeth. It tasted like caramel but deeper, with a slight bitterness from the browning. Your abuela would cut it into squares with a knife dipped in butter so it would not stick. She made it when she had milk that was about to turn. Waste nothing. Use everything. That was the philosophy that created this candy. When the milk dried up, so did the recipe. Number 2. Trompadas. From Guanajuato, like the charamuscas but wilder, the name means punches and eating one felt like it. The candy was hard on the outside and gritty on the inside. It cracked against your teeth and then dissolved into a sweet, nutty paste. The fillings varied by vendor and by mood. One day it was peanut, The next day it was coconut and cinnamon together. Making trompadas required pulling the hot pilonchillo syrup by hand, the same technique used in old-fashioned taffy. The sugar burned the fingers. Charamusqueros in the streets of Guanajuato City would stand at their copper pots from dawn until the afternoon sun made the sugar unworkable. A trompada cost about 300 old pesos in 1986. Today, fewer than a dozen artisans in Guanajuato still make them. Their children do not want to learn. The sugar burns too much. The money is too little. Number 1. Charamuscas. If you have been to the city of Guanajuato, you have seen them, or you would have 30 years ago. The charamusqueros of Guanajuato have practiced this craft for over 200 years. They are artisans, not candy makers. The shapes told stories. A rooster meant dawn was coming and another day of work waited. A skeleton meant your ancestors were watching from the other side. A cross meant protection on the road ahead. A mule meant labor, endurance, and the dignity of carrying weight without complaint. Tourists bought them. Children broke them. Families gave them as gifts during Day of the Dead. Gifts were small, but they carried meaning. The best charamusqueros could shape a figure in under a minute because they had to. Every charamusquero had scars on his palms from decades of handling the hot sugar. That was the price of the craft. He made skeletons so thin the light passed through them like stained glass. He died in 2015 and nobody took his place on the steps. Today, the charamusqueros are almost gone. Their average age was over 65. That is the cost of forgetting. That is what happens when nobody remembers. Make one of these this week, just one. Find a bag of dried habas and fry them with lime and chile. Buy a fresh coconut and grate it for cocadas. Toast some corn kernels and grind them into pinole. Pick the one your abuela made and stand in the kitchen the way she stood. Not over a microwave, not over a phone screen, over a comal, over a cazuela, or overheat. Because the snacks on this list did not disappear because people stopped wanting them. They disappeared because people stopped making them. And the only way to bring them back is to make them again. Tell me in the comments which of these 25 snacks you remember. Tell me which one your abuela made. I want to know if the charamuscas get more love than the cocadas. I want to know if anyone still has a grandmother who makes tamarind balls by hand the way Dona Carmen did at La Merced. Because somewhere in these 25 snacks is a memory that belongs to you. And a memory that someone made with their hands is better than anything you can buy in a plastic wrapper.